Hi there, and welcome to today's vlog. In my daily Bible reading today, and as I've mentioned before, I'm reading through the Bible using the Message version, and we're into the book of Nehemiah, Old Testament book. And the Message version by Eugene Peterson has an introduction to each of the books of the Bible, and I was reading the introduction to Nehemiah, and Eugene Peterson makes a very interesting point. Separating life into distinct categories of sacred and secular damages, sometimes irreparably, any attempt to live a whole and satisfying life, a coherent life with meaning and purpose, a life lived to the glory of God. And he goes on to talk about how Nehemiah and Ezra worked together in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and the temple after many, many years of exile. And he makes the point that Nehemiah was kind of a government official, almost a civil servant, to a foreign king when we meet him for the first time, whereas Ezra was a scholar and a teacher working with the scriptures. So those who divide life into sacred and secular may say that Nehemiah was on the secular side, Ezra on the more sacred side. And yet in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, we find them really working closely together. There is no divide. And in fact, as Peterson says, to try and separate our lives into the sacred bit and the secular bit, to the non-religious bit, if you like, really destroys God's design for us to live a unified, harmonious, fulfilling life. And that reminded me, as I was thinking about that, of a gentleman I used to know in one of my churches in years gone by. His name was Stephen. What a good name to have. Although I think he spelt his with a V, whereas mine is a PH. Stephen, he told me of a case in his working life. By the time I knew him, he'd retired. In his working life, and he worked in this big factory, I believe. And there was one of the bosses in the factory also happened to be someone who was part of the same church that Stephen and his wife went to. And Stephen told me that this chap on a Sunday was all nice and polite to people and well behaved, if you like, spoke kindly to people, whereas during the week in the work situation, he was a bit of a tyrant. He didn't treat his employees well at all, and he had a very bad reputation. And Stephen once, on one occasion, challenged the chap, and he said, "Look, how come it is on a Sunday in church you're all nice to people, polite and kind, and yet through the week you're really a bit of a tyrant, you're not treating people well? How does that work?" And that's a really challenging thing, isn't it? I can't remember what Stephen said was the outcome of that conversation. He was brave to even bring it up with this chap. But it reminds us that the whole of our lives is part of our service to God, and we're called to live the Christ-like life, not only when we're in church on a Sunday, but throughout the day, throughout the week, whether we're in the workplace situation or with our community, with our family. Indeed, Paul writes in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 23, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as if you're working for the Lord." So every part of our life, whether we go out to paid employment or voluntary, or whether we're at home with our family, or whether we're out in the community meeting people, whatever, every aspect of our life is part of our service to God, and should be lived in a way that honours God and reflects his love and his kindness. There is, in God's eyes, no sacred secular divide. It's all God's life lived to his glory and honour. There's my thought for the day. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today.